Shinzo Abe was among the first people who told then the international community that Donald Trump in private is dramatically different from Donald Trump in public.
Hi everyone and welcome to your GZERO World. I'm Ian Bremmer and I'm here in Tokyo, Japan, where in just a little bit I'm going to be talking to Dr. Tom Taniguchi. He's Prime Minister Abe's special advisor and his voice on foreign policy. After a big win for Prime Minister Abe, he's just the guy I want to be talking to. But first, let's have your world this week. Big news this week, especially since I'm in Tokyo, was a big win for Prime Minister Abe. Japan today stands as sort of the only single-party democracy in the advanced industrial world. It was a surprise for many. He had 30% approval only about 6 months ago, but the North Korea flap and his opposition just imploding led to what is now a serious majority and a supermajority for his coalition. It's the one country where we're not seeing a lot of political polarization. Part of that is cultural. You remember after the horrible tsunami and earthquake and the nuclear catastrophe, the Japanese people in Tokyo actually volunteered to cut back on their energy and to ration and all of the rest. But it's also the fact that there's virtually no immigration in Japan, not many people to dislike, and also the fact that the population is shrinking. The middle class and the working class is disappearing in Europe and the United States. In Japan, the whole population is disappearing. The middle class and working class feels pretty good. Things are very different indeed in the Czech Republic, which just had their own elections, and there the populace won big. The second wealthiest person in the country, Andrej Babiš, and his ANO, or Yes party, got over 30%. It was anti-immigrant, and it was drain that swamp. They consider him the Trump of the Czech Republic, and he won despite the fact that the Czech economy is doing extremely well. Why? Because they don't like the migrants, they don't like the refugees, and it's an anti-establishment protest vote. Even more concerning, some 10% of the Czechs decided to vote for the Freedom and Direct Democracy Party. They want a complete ban on Muslims. In the Czech Republic, their leader suggests walking pigs outside of mosques. East Europe looks farther and farther away from core Europe on a daily basis. Euroscepticism continues to ride high. And one more story in Europe, this time to Spain. In Catalonia, the government refused to rescind their independence referendum declared illegal by the Spanish courts. Prime Minister Rajoy in Madrid has now responded. He says for the first time they're going to use Article 155 of the Constitution. That means that the government will be suspended. If they have new elections in Catalonia, they're only going to be more harshly oriented against the Spanish government. So why would Rajoy do that? He's doing it because it's a very popular measure everywhere else in Spain. They don't want the Catalans to leave. The real problem here is the economy is going to implode. While that happens, over 1,000 Catalonian companies have already either left or are making legal plans to do so. Going to hurt the Spanish economy too. Yet one more problem on a continent that really doesn't need it. And now, your big interview. Hi everyone, I'm here in Tokyo, Japan, in the Prime Minister's official residence. We're talking with Dr. Tom Taniguchi, who is the special advisor to Prime Minister Abe, as well as his voice on foreign policy. And Tom, I'm delighted to be with you here today.
Thank you for having me.
So I guess we should start with the obvious, which is a big win for your Prime Minister. Certainly a year ago, if you had said that the strongest leader of an advanced industrial democracy was not going to be the US president or the German chancellor or the UK prime minister, but Shinzo Abe, you would have laughed me off the stage. It looks a little different today. How do you feel about this term? What's going to be different?
Well, it's going to be a little different from what I have seen so far. Complacency is something that Shinzo Abe should never ever have. Japan is fighting a long game, domestically speaking. You're looking at a very much slow growth. You're looking at very much a low productivity. And there is no panacea silver bullet. And so my sense is you must provide the nation with, I think, 3 C's. Commitment, obvious, and continuity and consistency. I think Shinzo Abe is willing to provide these 3s, and I hope that voters chose to buy those 3 C's for the moment.
Now, let me, broadly speaking, one of the things that I found interesting is when Trump won the election, which was a surprise to everyone, including your prime minister, he got on a plane immediately. Now, since then, there's been a clear difference between the warmth and personal connection of Prime Minister Abe and Donald Trump and, let's say, the European allies, who have been friendly but much more cautious, maybe much less effusive, much more pragmatic. Is that a conscious distinction? Does Abe want to be out there saying, I'm Trump's best friend and these other allies, doesn't matter what they do? Or is his perspective it's all the same?
Well, it's good to have good relationship between the United States and Japan, between the U.S. leader and the Japanese leader, from Japanese perspective. What I'm saying is, had Mrs. Clinton actually won the elections, Shinzo Abe could have and would have built as good relationship with Clinton as with Donald Trump.
You think that line into Trump, do you think that is helping to moderate the American president at all? Is that something that Abe is not interested in doing?
4 times in person like this,
yes,
and 15 times over phone. So the intensity of the conversations between the two is rare.
Certainly it appears that the relationship between Trump and Abe is closer than we've seen between leaders from these 2 countries in a very long time. Do you think that's true?
I think that's true. First time when Shinzo Abe met Donald Trump, it was in November last year.
Right, after the election. That's right.
He met President-elect Donald Trump.
Flew to Trump Tower.
Yes.
Saw the family too.
Yes, the Trump Tower. And Shinzo Abe paid very less attention to what people say in the news media.
Yep.
But he was genuinely curious to see who this man was about, and he wanted to see him just in person, and come to any sort of judgment after having seen him in person. I think that was something that Donald Trump really liked. So Shinzo Abe was among the first people who told then the international community that Donald Trump in private is dramatically different from Donald Trump in public. Shinzo Abe told us that Donald Trump was very much a keen listener, listening like this, and then paid acute attention to whatever Shinzo Abe had to say. I think Donald Trump, the first impression that
listening
Donald
like
Trump...
this. I'm going to do my Donald Trump listening thing.
Yes,
okay, that's good.
the first impression Donald Trump developed after meeting Shinzo Abe was pretty much a favorable one.
And in terms of North Korea itself, do you think, would Prime Minister Abe now accept the Chinese perspective, that the Chinese are doing more, they're trying to contain them, and that North Korea is not a proxy for China? Is that something that your government now would say, yeah, that's right, the Chinese are pretty much on board with that? Or
Proxy or not, the fact remains that had it not been trade connections North Korea has with China,
yes,
Pyongyang could not live a day.
Sure.
That's for sure.
Absolutely.
So it is incumbent upon Beijing to follow the sanction regime that the United Nations unanimously passed. So that's the hope Tokyo has, and the Japanese government is urging Beijing to do that.
How much do you want the Chinese to hit the North Koreans? In other words, the Chinese historically, and you know this better than almost anyone, are reluctant to push North Korea so far that it could lead to escalation or it could lead to potentially the regime crumbling. Are you sensitive to those concerns? Are they legitimate? Are they valid on the part of the Chinese government?
I don't know what sort of perceptions that Xi Jinping's leadership now holds vis-a-vis North Korea. The fact of the matter is, you're looking at a country that is very much dependent on its neighbor, i.e. China, nonetheless is building two things: nuclear arsenal and missile technology that could certainly lead them to shoot a big one that could reach even the continental United States.
And cyber capabilities.
Cyber capability, that's awesome, yes. And the question the international community poses now is that, is China going to tolerate all these, for whose sake? And I think Beijing is responsible of answering those questions.
Do you believe China is now taking this considerably more seriously, or no?
It appears that China is taking actions that are more meaningful than before, but it'll take a long time for us to see whether those means have been effective. Again, what North Korea is doing is in itself a long game. It's a bit of a deja vu because in the 1990s, we were equally alarmed. In the 2000s, we had something called the Six-Party Dialogue Framework.
I remember.
So, in a sense, we have come full circle. Now, what's changing is that China is pulling its own lever like this and trying to squeeze North Korea, and let's see how they will be effective.
And when President Trump says diplomacy is not useful with the North Koreans, the Japanese on board with that?
In general terms, it's very much an accurate description because there have been two presidents. Jimmy Carter went to Pyongyang, and Jimmy Carter used his master capability as a diplomat, meeting Kim Il-sung. And then China, Washington, Tokyo, Seoul, Moscow all got together and used the maximum power of our diplomacy, combined diplomacy. That was in the 2000s. All these two attempts have failed rather miserably because we were all cheated by Pyongyang.
So let's move to the other great man who also had a good week, maybe even a better week than Shinzo Abe, Xi Jinping. We just had a party congress.
Yes.
And the big seven are all Xi's men.
Right.
And we don't know who the successor is.
No.
So do you think a strong Xi coming out of this party congress with the amount of power that he has individually, is that good for Japan or bad for Japan?
I don't think it's black and white. But if I can tell you what's going on between Beijing and Tokyo, some people say that Japan and China are undergoing one of the most harsh winter seasons, if you like. Suppose it's true, then I should say that it is like an Indian summer, right? It's warmer, and we're
just monsoons blowing through, basically.
Probably, but we're hoping next year. It's going to be the 40th anniversary since the signing of the basic treaty between the two nations. And 10 years previously, it was Hu Jintao that came to Japan and had an extended discussions with then leader. So we're hoping that it's going to be repeated by Xi next year.
I remember when Abe was prime minister first time around, one of the things he talked about was creating a union of democracies across the region. China obviously pointedly not part of that, focused on values.
Yes.
It seems almost quaint now because the American president doesn't talk so much about values. Brexit, harder to talk about values. Does Abe talk as much privately about the importance of values and democracy as he used to?
even more so than before.
Does this worry him, what's happening in the world right now as a consequence of that?
Well, that's what people say in the media, but Shinzo Abe is urging all others to wave the same banner as high as possible. Democracy, human rights, and freedom of press, those values. I think Shinzo Abe is still very much earnest in sticking to those values. And I think Shinzo Abe wants his attempts to be followed by as many people as possible.
So I want to finally turn back to Japan.
Yeah.
Liberal democracies in the world right now are having a hard time.
Right.
I'm sure you know a lot of divisions in Europe, a lot of divisions in the United States. Feels like fewer divisions in Japan.
Right.
Is that true? And if it is, why do you think that is?
I think that's true. If there is any deviation in terms of Japanese political culture from the rest, it is that the younger generations are supporting the incumbent. Among the 20s, the ratio of support for Shinzo Abe is the highest. So there is no Bernie Sanders moment. There's no Corbyn moment in Japanese democracy. That's puzzling. Puzzling for me as well. Young people are not wishing to have something dramatic change, but they are, well, the simplistic interpretation of which is the young people are risk averse because they are children of long-term economic malaise that's taken hold for so long. But liberal democracy, with all its faults and shortcomings, is the only regime that you could have and you should follow. That much, I think, has been extremely deeply understood by the Japanese, perhaps because we grew up believing that Japan in the 1930s badly failed in its fledgling democracy. So democracy is a curious animal. Well, it takes a lot of generations to be mature, and I don't think the Japanese people are confident that democracy is mature enough. So before alleging liberal democracy, I think a lot of people are still saying that, is this enough? Is our democracy mature enough? I think that's the question that a lot of people are still asking themselves.
So on the back of this big election, what's the one thing in Japan that's worrying you that you think might actually go wrong?
Yeah, it is. The country is a basket case of many challenges. You're looking at declining population. You're looking at 70-something killing 70-something. Juvenile crime, the number of which is constantly on the rise. The crime rate for the 70s and 80s on the constant rise. And so welfare provision is in dollar terms is bigger than defense spending of the United States, defense spending of China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, UK, all combined. That's Japan. So it's very much easy to be pessimistic about the Japanese future. So Shinzo Abe, not by design, but almost by accident, has to play a role as a cheerleader in chief. So what worries me very much is this smaller sense of self-efficacy among the young.
Indeed. Well, with that, still in this world today, it's nice to see a little continuity and a little stability in a corner of the world that can use it. Tom Taniguchi, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Great to see you, sir.
Great to see you. Thank you.
That's our show this week. Be sure to listen to our GZERO World Podcast with an extended interview with Tom Taniguchi wherever you happen to listen to podcasts. And I'll see you next week.